You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Here we go.
Here we go. If you're not hearing you, you're not. It's not because you're not talking. That's how we started it.
And that's true.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan. I'm sitting here pushing wrong buttons.
You do that regularly.
I'm here with Brett Newcomb.
Sometimes you push my buttons wrong.
But that's completely unintentional.
But I'm a glutton for punishment.
I would
keep coming back for more.
I would never intentionally do that. Although that is
Because I believe in a place called Hope. If I can steal that line from Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Actually, I've been to Hope.
Hope, Arkansas.
Yep, I worked a railroad train through Hope, Arkansas one time in a driving rain with 2 fusees in my hands, guiding the engineer. But I was younger then.
Was Johnny Cash with you?
Only in spirit.
Yeah. That sounds like a Johnny Cash song if I've ever heard one.
Been,
Yeah.
We went by the jail. That might have.
Yeah. So we were talking about some stuff before we started today.
As we are wont
to do. Yeah. And the article that I sent you for this discussion.
I was so impressed to get that.
You were impressed?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because you have this erudite approach to things that neither one of us know anything about, like philosophy and Friedrich Nietzsche.
Yeah.
Thus spake Zarathustra. I don't know any of that stuff.
Well, but
I grew up in Arkansas. We didn't do.
But you did therapy for a long time.
Well, yeah, I did that.
And people came in
But
and
philosophy?
They said to you, I don't know if life is worth living. There's lots of things about my life that are going wrong, and I am frustrated and don't know what to do about it.
Can I have your dog?
Yeah. So, that's the old adage. What happens when you play a country song backwards? You get your car back, you get out of jail, you get your wife back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that is very apropos to doing therapy. And so nihilism is the philosophical principle that the article is written about. And I think that is directly applicable to doing therapy, at least the idea of nihilism, people thinking that nothing matters.
So I think, as I understood the article, what they were saying is not so much that you need to be able to articulate all the fine level distinctions in Nietzsche's theory, but that you needed to ask your client or get a sense from your client, do they believe that all life exists in service of a particular goal or destination or good, that we all make our little contributing points just like lemmings in the sea? And secondly, do they feel like life itself is worth living absent that kind of unified goal?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, that makes sense to me. And if I'm talking to a client that's suffering from despair and despondency and depression, I want to find out, do you still feel like life is worth living?
Mm-hmm.
And if so, why? If not, why not?
Mm-hmm.
And what needs to change? Do you need some kind of an epiphany? Do you need a knock on the forehead from the heavens? I mean, what do you need? And also, how do I understand you? What are you saying to me? Are you saying that you hurt, that you're alone, that you're despondent, that you have no energy, that you have no sense that tomorrow will be better? And then can we discuss that? Where do those feelings come from? What's happened in your life that causes you to feel this way? And that may segue into another conversation we're going to do on a different day, which is self-forgiveness. Because I think all of us have done things about which we feel remorse or shame. So the process continues, the conversation continues. Can I sit in a space with you and hold that space safely enough that you can explore those feelings?
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen people in that moment who literally could do nothing but cry and gasp for breath and was able to say, I see you, you're safe here with me, and it's okay, just keep breathing, keep awareness functioning, and at some point the clouds break and something, glimmer of something comes through, even not necessarily better, but quieter. And then we can start to say, are there tiny steps that we can take that are in your power alone, no one else involved, to improve those circumstances? You know, we talk all the time about really chronic severe depression and the treatment of that, and whether it's biologically driven or emotionally driven or both or what have you. But what we do know about treating that is if you can get people to identify specific baby step goals over which they have control. You get up and brush your teeth, get up and get dressed, get up and take a shower, get up and walk around the block, do 25 push-ups, any number of things like that. And if you can get them to make a concrete list and check them off on the list so they see it visually, their mind will swarm and they won't remember and they'll discount and devalue. But if they see it, there's a documented evidence of progress within which hope and positivity can begin to grow. So I think it's worthwhile. But this article goes back to the bigger picture.
Yeah. So what I got out of it was this, that Nietzsche was saying that it isn't just the individual who says life is not worth living. Actually, he didn't believe that that was nihilistic. That isn't the point of nihilism. But he also believed that the individual who lived a faith-based existence was potentially investing in their own nihilism, because eventually that faith-based system could have feet of clay, and when the individual realizes that, then they're distraught and feel directionless. And so what he said is that life should be worth living just because it is life. Life should have its own intrinsic value just because it exists. And so this idea of mindfulness or living in the moment was what I got out of the article, which is something that we tell clients all the time. But for me, I would like to promote an idea. You've said before many times that you believe that the most resilient people are people that you've experienced who have some faith-based direction in their life.
I have.
Yeah. So what I would say is that that's not nihilistic. The goal is to have that faith-based direction and not get discouraged if things happen that shake that foundation.
Well, yeah, I mean, continuing your argument or your understanding of the Nietzsche article, he's saying if you invest yourself in a faith-based orientation of life, whether that's faith in a religious value or a person or political philosophy or what happens, and then you discover that there's feet of clay involved, that somebody has a corruption issue, somebody has a sexual misbehavior issue, a property acquisition issue, and they got $9 million they hid from the world, or whatever it might be, that then there's no support under that foundation and the whole world collapses, and then you're suicidal. There's no reason to go on living because whatever you anchored yourself to turned out to be corrupted. And I think and I don't know that Nietzsche says this, but I think the extended concept is that human beings are looking for something larger than themselves to provide meaning for life. And they invest themselves in those things. They reach for those things. They try to acquire them. And if it's a philosophical or religious orientation, they try to live within those precepts because then they feel safe. I'm doing it right. I'm doing it the right way. And then if there's a rupture in that, if the air goes out of the balloon and what you put all your chips on turns out to be squalid, then where do you go? And what Nietzsche was saying is where you go is in the belief that life itself independently and uniquely has value. Not a belief system, not a specific goal orientation, not the acquisition of a group to belong to, just living in and of itself is a positive or potentially positive experience. So the challenge then is to get somebody to look at that and say there is value in the physiological pleasure of taking a shower, of watching the sun come up, of smelling the roses. We have poetry and songs, Stop and Smell the Roses, and all these kind of things that are designed to message that, which are easier messages to hear. I mean, there's a Willie Nelson song, I woke up this morning, not dead again. Those things are easier to hear than to sit down and read Friedrich Nietzsche. And to try to analyze what the hell did he just say? I read those paragraphs over and over again, and I'm somewhat literate. I've read a couple books, and I struggle.
You've written a couple.
I actually have, yes.
So my wandering. So you know, as I'm reading this, and then we're talking about this, where my mind goes to is, I believe there is value in a faith-based system. I live a faith-based system. I believe there is value in that. My conflict, and I wouldn't propose this to the leaders of the church that I attend, because I never go against. My own personal belief, though, is this, that the issue that people have in a faith-based system is that they give all of the responsibility for things not going well to themselves. I'm a sinner. I'm corrupt. And so when things go wrong, it's not God's fault, it's my fault. But then when things go right, it's glory to God. And I don't think that's the goal. I think the goal is what Nietzsche is saying, is that there's just goodness in life. And it's not necessarily your fault only when things all go wrong, but it's also not only God's fault when all things go right. I mean, you had something to do with that. And so it's okay to recognize that there is an ebb and flow. Things are not always going to go wrong, just like things are not always going to go right. And I think that's what Nietzsche is trying to help us understand, is that there's an ebb and flow, and overall you hope that what you get on balance is pretty positive, pretty wonderful, pretty awesome, pretty productive. And that's where we invest our energy, is to say, hey, on average, I think that my life is valuable and worth living.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I have a different take on what you're saying about faith-based foundations. Okay. I think the common ingredient in all of them that I've ever read about, studied, or experienced is humanity. Mm-hmm. And human nature corrupts the idealized structure that's been created. And so you can have a church that says the only legitimate reason for human beings to have sex is procreation. Mm-hmm. You're trying to have babies because that extends the creation of God in magical, wonderful ways. So that's the only reason that you can do it. Any other thing is corruption and sinful. Mm-hmm. And then those leaders are off in the back room diddling little boys and girls, or the choir leader's wife, or whomever. And then they come out and say, well, I've sinned. I remember Jimmy Swaggart coming on television crying. I've sinned. I've fallen short of the glory of God. Woe is me. I've been with prostitutes. Okay, I mean, and he's human, and those are human failings, and you have to have compassion for that. But where I get stuck then is how you get up on Sunday and rant and rail at me for being a sinner, and me for being imperfect, and me for being less than, and shame and denigrate me because of all those things. And then you get in there on Monday and say, well, I had a bad week. Woe is me. I just, the hypocrisy.
Right.
Is overwhelming to me.
I remember exactly that time that you're talking about when Jimmy Swaggart was on TV. He was wearing a $25,000 Rolex gold watch while he was saying
Jesus
those things.
Jesus has been very good to me.
Yeah.
The prosperity doctrine.
Right.
How many of those preachers out there are saying, you know, if God loves you, it'll be visible to the world. You'll be driving a Camaro or a Corvette or a Lamborghini and wearing a Rolex, and the world will see that and say, God, he is beloved of God.
Right. And so I don't think either one of us wants to go on a tangent about religion or faith.
I don't mind.
Yeah, okay, but I believe that that is good. What I'm saying is that, yes, man corrupts all perfect things, clearly, in a faith-based system. But the goal of a faith-based system is to not say, oh, God's going to take care of me, God's going to take care of me, God's going to take care of me, but to live your life in a way,
disciplined way, in a structured way.
And so you don't get too high when things are great, and you don't get too low when things are bad. And
you're
don't,
also part of a group that believes similar things. So you know you're among the righteous.
Yeah.
You're among the chosen. Popular. I mean, go back and look at the Puritans, you know, the chosen. And they also, prosperity doctrine in the early days, those who do well in life are visible because God loves them. And if you aren't doing as well as they are, then the problem is you're not following the script the way they are.
Right.
So here's the script. Go follow it. Don't sin in these ways. Do this.
Right.
I think there's something in human nature that calls us to find an anchoring orientation of a group to belong to.
Well, there's no question.
Us or them.
And because I tell people all the time, in whether it's sociology class or not, that there's not a single culture on the face of the planet that has not created some kind of myth about life and how things started. That is an inherent, genetically entombed in us
And they're
trait.
overlappingly similar. I mean,
Yeah.
you go back and look at history, the origin stories, the flood stories, they're in every culture.
Right.
So we have an innate hunger to belong to a system, an organized system that'll encapsulate our understanding of the world and make us safe. And it's often us or them. It's the Jews against the Muslims, against the Christians, against the Catholics. Not that there aren't
Right.
sub distinctions among all those. Blacks against whites.
But that goes back to the old concept of in-group, out-group.
Yeah.
In psychology, and we've talked about that in the past.
Family,
and,
clan, tribe,
yeah.
nation, state.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for me, though, what I would say is that I think we both agree that people who are involved in a faith-based system tend to display resilience greater than people who don't. And that doesn't have to be a religious faith-based system. That just tends to be what we see in therapy. And we're not necessarily espousing that for anybody. People can find their own groups to belong to, but there is something
You don't come and
inherently
pay me
good.
money for me to break down your religious
Yeah,
values.
exactly.
Yeah. And
But
I
there-
wouldn't begin to do that.
But there is something good that can be gleaned by the individual from belonging to some kind of group.
Reliance, balance, structure, strength, all of those things can be a part of it.
Okay,
And
let's go to our break, and when we come back, we're going to refocus and talk about how you and I would take these things that we've talked about and apply them clinically in therapy.
okay.
Hey, Brett, if you were going to tell somebody to check out something on the internet to help them with their mental health, what would you tell them?
I tell them, listen to Psych with Mike.
Why would you tell them that?
Because it's probably one of the most easily listenable experiences you can have that will give you information that's useful for a whole spectrum of concerns that people have.
I agree, and I have actually been told that by at least a dozen people, several of whom were not married to me, and some of them didn't even know me.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. It's when we get that kind of feedback from people, it is so incredibly humbling and overwhelming for me.
It is for both of us.
Yeah. So we really appreciate it, and as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back. So you seemed amused by that what I said before the break, and so is that not where you were thinking we were going to go?
I used to have a partner that I worked with, who was extremely proud of his Christian faith and wanted to engage his clients in his interpretation of Christianity. Quote the Bible, chapter and verse, take it into sessions, irrespective of what their orientation was, because he wanted to reach out. And I would challenge him and say, bud, you need to be a preacher, not a therapist. You're proselytizing. You're not doing therapy. Not to challenge your beliefs at all about whatever it is you believe, but your role categorization here is wrong.
Right.
Because I don't believe my job allows me to proselytize my point of view.
And both of us feel strongly that is not our role as a therapist, and neither of us would proselytize openly.
I need to respect what you bring to the table. And if you bring to the table an orientation that's religiously different from mine, I have to be able to put mine aside and listen to yours in a way that helps me use, for instance, the most obvious example I can think of fitting with the Nietzsche argument. If I have a client that's struggling with sin and failure on their part, then I want to know, do you have a religious foundation? let's say that it's a church of some kind. What does your church say to you about forgiveness? What does your church say to you about human fallibility? What does your church offer, require, or allow for you to deal with these feelings that you're keeping bottled up inside yourself? Because this is a poison that you've ingested, and we need to get it out of your system. That doesn't mean we ignore that it happened, we ignore reality in any way. It means you're tied in a knot. Can we untie the knot? So tell me about your faith. Tell me what it teaches you. Help me understand how you can say, all right, that's what I have been taught, what I believe, what I understand, but it doesn't apply to me. Why not? How are you different? And not to get into a debate with them, because it all got to be focused for me, it's got to be focused from the standpoint of support. How can I help hold you in this space so that you don't collapse? So that you see the beginnings of some strength and some shoots or sprouts that are starting to break through the ground. We've got to find a way to make this blossom. And so that's
And
short answer of how I would approach it.
And whether it is religion or not, I would say that 12-step organizations fit that same role.
They can.
They
yeah.
can.
I
Right.
would accept that. Yeah.
And I would even say that for some people, being a fan of a sports team can fit that role. It's something that you feel. Yeah, I mean, it just makes you feel like you're a part of a group that is larger than you. Now, you have to keep a perspective, right? You can't just say, oh, I'm going to live my life by the St. Louis Cardinals. We live in St. Louis. And everything about my life is going to ride on whether or not they're doing well or they're doing poorly. But that can give you a sense of belonging. But in therapy, what I want to say to people is, what is intrinsically valuable about your existence that you can believe in, that can give you the motivation to want to continue to move forward with your life? I think that's what Nietzsche would want us to say is, what is, if we refocus.
And I think if I tried to say exactly the literal quotation of what you just said, my client would look at me and go, huh?
Well, okay.
No, I'm serious.
No, I know. I wouldn't necessarily say it in those
I
words.
misunderstood.
Yeah.
But that's a...
But
you have
just
to be
by saying,
leery of intellectual masturbation.
yeah. But you know that's what I love. But
That's what your wife told me.
That's what I love to do with you. But in therapy, we do exactly what you say. Can you get up and take a shower? Can you get up and eat a meal? Can you do things,
Therapy.
activities of daily
Do something
living?
for somebody else. Can you go to the grocery store for the lady down the street who can't go?
And anytime that you propose that and a client says yes and they follow through with that, they are investing in the intrinsic value of their own existence.
Or they'll come home and find a reason to be a failure. I bought sauerkraut and she hates sauerkraut.
Yeah.
So now I don't know what to do.
Right.
It's just, we teach ourselves how to be hyper self-critical when we need to be. We may run from it and hide from it as much as possible, but when we get in one of these valleys, it's almost as if we don't believe there are peaks anymore that we're entitled to have.
Right.
So part of the challenge of therapy is to say, okay, you're in the valley.
Right.
That's very real. You're
Right.
in the valley. There's a path forward. Let's find it.
And what I tell people all the time is, everybody comes to my office and they say, I'm just waiting for the next shoe to fall.
Yeah.
But no one ever says to me, things are rotten right now. But you know what? That's okay, because that just means something's good going to happen tomorrow. But statistically, both things are just as true.
That's like the joke about the little boy that found a shoebox full of horse manure under the Christmas tree because his parents knew he wanted a pony and couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
So they just got him some horse manure. But he opened the box and thought, oh my God, there's a horse right
Yeah,
there.
it has to be.
Yeah.
Where's the manure come from?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, that's actually a story of optimism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
And
what we want to encourage.
That's what we want to encourage.
We
Exactly.
believe in optimism. We believe in a place called hope.
Yes. And that each client can find their way to that place if they are willing. But you can't drag a dead horse there.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I would say to therapists, because we all oftentimes want to try and focus on this, is that if your client is unwilling to go to this place called hope, you can't make them, and you're not a bad therapist because they don't want to go.
Right.
And so that happens sometimes to all of us. The client doesn't want to go a place we think would be healthier.
I go back to, talking about therapists and their understanding of all that. When in training programs, and I taught in training program for therapists for 30 years, I would say to them, it's a market-driven economy. We're not right for everyone. I'm going to have clients that come to see me. They're going to suddenly have an epiphany from wherever they get their epiphanies that say, this guy's not right for me. And they don't come back. And they may go out in the community and say, oh, he's lousy. He's a loser. I wouldn't pay him money. But I will also have clients that come to me and say, oh, thank God you saved my life. I have to ride the waves of that and be aware that that is a possibility with everybody that comes through the door.
Right.
So I'm not right for everybody. I don't speak everybody's language, and people don't resonate with me. What I would be willing to do, and did for years, is say to a potential client, come and spend 2 sessions with me. If you come back for a third one, pay me for all 3 of them. If you don't come back for a third one, forget it. I'll invest that in you. Will you invest that in yourself?
And which is a great message.
Well, probably 95% of them kept coming back. So, yeah. It worked.
And yet, both of us have done therapy, and both of us have supervised people who have done therapy, and we have seen clients and had students or prospective therapists come to us and say, this person's not moving, I'm so frustrated, I don't know what to do. When that happens, what do we say to them?
They can't move. They can't do it till they can do it.
Right.
Just keep investing the time.
Right. And so is there still value in the therapy?
If they show up.
Yes, if they show up.
They're getting some out of it.
Right.
You don't know.
Right.
Otherwise, they wouldn't come.
And
Guarantee it.
And it's not the therapist's job to try and gauge whether or not the client is getting something valuable out of it. If the client is coming back and paying for it, they're getting something valuable out of it.
So I was at some pains when I was doing marriage counseling to say to my clients, my job here is not to save your marriage, to make you leave here saying, well, we're not going to get divorced. My job here is to help each one of you get strong enough and honest enough to say to the other, this is who I am. If this is who I am, do you choose me?
Yeah.
Because quite often you would find relationships where somebody would say, well, I chose this person because they were almost perfect. And I was convinced that given a little work, they could get better. Those don't work out.
Right. And in reality, you almost certainly inevitably chose that person because they represented some unfinished challenge that you had from your family of origin.
That's what the literature says.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, have you not seen that play out?
Oh, I have.
Yeah. And I mean, I just can't. It's amazing to me how that revelation falls out eventually in therapy. And that doesn't mean that you can't repair that relationship or you can't make that relationship good in real time. But we have to be honest that almost all of us were attracted to our significant other initially for some kind of pathologic reason.
I don't know. Pathologic is the right word.
And I don't know if that's the right word. I struggled with that when I was forming the sentence.
Yeah.
But for some challenge that was residual within us.
I think the challenge can be a positive challenge. I see strengths in this person that I want to inculcate in myself or emulate myself. I see attractive qualities of this individual that I want to figure out, can I have those? Can I take that and learn how to be that way? Because that's what I want to be, like that person in those ways. I think we tend to describe it in terms of, okay, I see a force to push against. I see an issue that's unresolved for me subconsciously, and so here's a continuation of my childhood drama.
Right.
And I'll give a chance to work it out with this person who instinctively knows how to say those words and write that script. I think that's what is often written about for marriage counseling. That's why we pick people, so we can do that. Different person, same crap.
But
and we have to work through it.
Can both of those things be true? Can
Yes,
you
I think
be
they can.
attracted to
That's
that person?
the point I'm trying to make,
Okay,
because I
okay.
think we
Yeah.
don't focus on
Yeah.
the more positive side. I mean, I look at my wife and I see qualities that I admire and strengths that I admire that I wish that I had. And I study her. I mean, like, how do you do that? How do you do what you do? How do you not get depleted and exhausted and angry or broken? And you just bounce right back and keep going. I'm not like that. I get pissy and angry and pouty, and I'm a good pouter.
No, that's not true.
I'm a very good pouter. And I can be. I have once in my life very, very passive aggressive. I've given it up most of the time, but if I really need it, I can reach back and get it.
So so you said once. Oh, at one
Once
point
upon
in
a
your life.
time, yeah.
Okay, now you did it one time.
Oh, no.
Gotcha.
I did a lot.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
a very competent passive aggressive person.
And you don't have to answer this question if you don't want
Well,
to.
I never do, yeah.
We're at the end. So, but I would add. But now I'm curious. Would you be willing to share how you identified that and why you wanted to change it?
Well, I would say that was the dance that I danced for most of my first marriage, and I became willing to change it when that marriage ended and it didn't work.
Okay, I
which
think
was
that's
kind of a slap in the head.
I think that's very honest and very genuine. And so that is one of the ways in which. So sometimes a dark place leads to a better tomorrow.
There's a light up above.
Yeah. All right.
Big John.
If you want to do the show a favor, what you can do is find us on the interwebs on YouTube at Psych with Mike and subscribe to the show. That is super beneficial.
Thank you for changing your verbiage. I appreciate that. I recognize that.
If you find us on the Apple Podcast, you can leave us a review and give us a rating, and that helps other people find the show, which is super helpful for us, and we really appreciate it. The music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue, and if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.